Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
Hello there, very good evening and welcome to your Primetime News Bulletin. I'm Shane Silva.
I'm Stephanie Lazarus. Before we head into the news in detail, here's a look at the headlines for tonight.
President says no room in the Sri Lanka Freedom Party for the corrupt. Prime Minister to bring in new act to manage national debt. Minister Susil Premajayanta critical of government promise to create 1 million jobs. Maldivian joint opposition files petition at Supreme Court calling for temporary removal of President Abdullah Yameen from office.
President Maithripala Sirisena says he will only betray fraud, corruption, waste and thievery. The President expressed these views at a public rally held in Rikilagaskanda, Hanguranketa this evening.
I said the day before yesterday in Ratnapura that if all 96 SLFP members of parliament stand with me, I can form a government. But what is the true story here? Why did I say that? I said that because I know that they cannot come to me because they do not accept my policies. GL Pirisa's rogue party, the dirty drain of GL Pirisa's politics. This is GL Pirisa's epidemic disease ward in politics. It is a party that was formed to protect thieves, a party that covers for the thieves. It is a party that was formed to secure the freedom of thieves. It is surrounded by thieves. There are many who are ignorant of this and stand around there shouting. This is the truth. I must say to you very clearly that I know very well that these thieves will not stand with me, accept my policies and embark on a clean political journey. After I appointed the Bond Commission and they began hearing evidence, it hurt certain people in this government too. Even they are pointing the finger at me and saying, "We made you president. Is what you are doing right?" Your party, position or race does not matter to me. I will only betray and oppose fraud, corruption, waste and thievery.
This special guest visited President Maithripala Sirisena on the 14th of October last year. Her name is M.N. Amani Ryder. True to his word, yesterday the President called on Amani at her home in Badulla.
In spite of his busy schedule, the President took time off following a campaign rally in Badulla yesterday to visit Amani Ryder at her house in Badulla and fulfill the promise he made to her. Amani had been awaiting the President's arrival along with many of her friends and rushed to greet the head of state when he arrived at her home. After conversing with the children, the President departed, having invited the children to come visit him in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to the News First newsroom. I'm Ramesh Iruga Bandara. Now, we at News First, we have been constantly keeping you up to date with regard to the latest development activities, and we have also been bringing you instances where the powers that be have cut corners and gotten caught. Now, I want to turn your attention to one particular item today. This is the website of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, and this page is dedicated to the Hambantota port. Now, we know that a concession agreement was signed and a 99-year lease was signed, and this was eventually given over to a Chinese company. However, I am not going to be talking about the Hambantota port today. I am going to be talking about a power plant that will be built in close proximity to this port. That is a 400 megawatt LNG power plant, or a liquid natural gas power plant that has been proposed for construction. Now, there are several questions that we have that we would like to pose to the powers that be regarding this 400 megawatt LNG power plant. Number one, was it part of the long-term power generation plan produced by the PUCSL? Now, as you know, the Public Utilities Commission draws up plans for long-term power generation, which includes phasing out old power plants and building new power plants so that we can meet the emerging and growing needs of electricity in this country. Now, this is that particular long-term power generation plan that I was talking about. It has the details for 2019, 20, and it goes on. However, we could not find a 400 megawatt LNG power plant in our investigation. So the question is, was this 400 megawatt power plant included in this long-term power generation plan? Secondly, will this power that is generated through this LNG power plant be given to the national grid, or will it be exclusively for the purposes of the developments that are taking place in Hambantota? As you know, the government has proposed several development activities, several industries for the Hambantota region surrounding the Hambantota port. So will this power plant be catering to the national grid, or will it be catering to these industries that are coming up? Thirdly, how will the payments be made for this particular power plant? And also, most importantly, was due process followed in setting up or in proposing this 400 megawatt power plant? Now, they say that this is a G2G agreement, that this power plant, LNG power plant, will be built on a G2G agreement. However, in reality, this agreement for the power plant has been signed between two companies, that is the Ceylon Electricity Board and the China Machinery Engineering Corporation, or CMEC. So, is it really a G2G agreement? And we have received information that, according to the information that we have received, the power generator through this LNG power plant will eventually be purchased by the Ceylon Electricity Board. When there is an element of purchasing involved, would we have been able to generate this power at a lower cost? How can we generate this power at a lower cost? We have to build these plants at a lower cost and lower operational cost. How can we find that out? We have to go in for a tender process. Now, was a tender process done before they made plans to create this 400 megawatt power plant? Of course, if a tender process was not done, then we will never know whether we could have gotten this done at a much lower price. Also, we agree that there needs to be transparency in such dealings, because that is what this current administration came to power on. These are the things that they highlighted when they came into power 3 years ago. Now, we agree that we need more power plants. We agree that there are old power plants that will be phased out and that there is a growing need for power plants. But just because we need power plants does not mean that we can allow white-collar criminals in our administration to go to foreign countries on their own personal trips and then sign documents to amount to something which the people of this country will have to pay for. The people of this country do not need to pay for the sins committed by such white-collar criminals. What will eventually happen? Well, the prices of utilities for you and I will increase. It's back to the main news desk, but before that, we go in for a short commercial break.
Welcome back. A public meeting was held in Kegol yesterday under the auspices of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Speaking at the meeting, the Prime Minister clarified the reasons to convene Parliament on the 8th of February.
They said they wanted to discuss the Bond Commission report, so I convened Parliament on the 10th of January, but it ended up in jeers and hooting. The matter was never spoken of. Now there are two Commission reports. Now the issue, when can Parliament convene to discuss them? Will it be before or after the election? I am the only one who can convene Parliament before the 19th of January. The Speaker made a request from me on Friday to convene Parliament. I met him that night and said, I will convene Parliament on the 8th. We have nothing to hide, nothing to sweep under the carpet. We are open and transparent. We can talk about policies. We will be bringing in a new act which will restrict obtaining such loans called the Liability Management Act. What we want to do is to reduce the time period of repaying this country's massive national debt.
Well, you're back at the News First newsroom. I have Faraz Shaukatali joining me today. Now, Faraz, the claims made by the United National Party faithful is that the UNP leadership of Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, our Prime Minister, that he is Mr. Clean and that everything he speaks is the truth and that he is an exemplary leader. With the things that have happened in the recent past, how fair are these claims?
Well, they may be talking about pre-2015, but post-2015, there's much that has happened that leaves, there's a lot to be desired, really. And therefore, so many things have happened, so many departures from established procedure, from established process, that really, if one was to look at it with this cold neutrality, then the Prime Minister's position is absolutely untenable.
Now, the Prime Minister has a track record in Parliament as well.
Yes, 40 years in Parliament, it's unbroken. 23 years as leader of the United National Party, and this time round, the fourth time as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka.
So he is no stranger to parliamentary procedures?
Oh, not at all. He must easily be one of the more experienced hands at understanding parliamentary procedure, the Hansard and all sorts of things. So
now, in what you said was, this may be true for the post or pre-2015 era.
Perhaps.
Is it because of the 2015 bond scam that you're saying?
Well, yes, because you see, the government, led by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's charged with being, in effect, the managing director of this, if you looked at it from a company perspective.
Okay.
And they came in promising good governance, accountability, responsibility, and a level playing field for everybody. And they said that the finances were in a mess.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it absolutely amazing that it is that very point, finances, that has led to today the concern right throughout the country. And of course, Ramesh, you must know by now that I mean the bond scam.
Okay, Faraz, before we go any further, I want our viewers to listen to a statement made by the Prime Minister on the 17th of March 2015 in Parliament. Let's listen to this and then get back to our debate.
I insisted on a public auction because private placements have led to corruption and lack of transparency. Previously, parcels of government bonds were handed out to selected individuals on a favoured basis through a system of private placement. It took place outside the normal auctions of government bonds.
Now, with the details that were uncovered through the Presidential Commission, I see a small issue in the statement that we heard.
Indeed. The Prime Minister, if you heard him right, he said, I insisted, and perhaps you want to get the meaning of the word.
The definition of the word.
The definition of the word.
Let me get that for you.
Insisted.
I think I'll have it over here. There you go.
Right. The word insist means demand something forcefully, not accepting refusal. She insisted on carrying her own bag, and the Prime Minister said nothing about a bag, but what he did say was that he insisted on the system being changed. He said that there was corruption in the other in this other system, according to him, and the system, he insisted, and as you can see, the definition of insist is to do something forcefully.
Exactly.
Right. Well, that is what happened, and therefore, when we read the page 930 of the Presidential Commission of looking into the issuance of bonds.
Let me put it up for you.
Now, if we look at that here, page 930, and it says here, the evidence establishes that Mr. Mahendran had not been instructed or directed by the Honourable Prime Minister to act unilaterally and immediately suspend or stop direct placements on the 27th of February 2015. Well, I'm so sorry, but I do wish that the commissioners would have mentioned what the Honourable Prime Minister said in Parliament, that he insisted on the change. Not only was Ranil Wickremesinghe the minister in charge of the subject of the central bank, but he was also, and he still is, the Prime Minister, the first among equals. And Arjuna Mahendran, the former governor of the central bank, during court proceedings, he said it under oath, that, and then Dev Gunasekara will attest to it, because he got him to swear before he made the statement. He said that he did only as he was asked. He was following the Prime Minister's instructions. And therefore, Ramesh, it would have been far, far better for the commissioners. I do wish that the commissioners would have included what the Prime Minister said, had they, which is that he insisted on the change. Had the commissioners actually said it and put this in the report, it would have added context to their report, and it would have certainly added clarity, and it would have been also keeping with this notion of being coldly neutral. And that's really essential, because this was such an important report for our country, and it's absolutely unacceptable that this.
If you were watching this broadcast at home, if you saw the voice cut of the Prime Minister and then you saw this statement delivered by the Presidential Commission in page 930, what would you think of as a viewer?
Well, there are some people who may think that this report lacks, or this section certainly, section 19, page 930, dealing with the Prime Minister's statement in Parliament, that some people may think that it lacks, that it is partial, and that it is, that it is partisan, that it lacks impartiality and it lacks bipartisanship. And this is absolutely sad, bad news for Sri Lanka. As we are fighting corruption, we are fighting political patronage, and these two items have conspired to stymie the progress that this country can make and should be making.
Now, you mentioned the word conspire. Now, this is a funny thought that came across my head for us. Now we know of secret societies operating all throughout the world. Do you think that there is some old boys club or a fraternity of some kind in play here?
Well, it's entirely possible. Certainly, you also missed, there is something known as a lawyers' collective, right? Now then, all these things are possible. But, to be frank, Ramesh, we need to leave our old boy networks behind, and especially when we pursue the duty of care that we have towards the people who elected us to that high office. It is no mistake or anything of the sort that people refer to the Prime Minister as the Honourable Prime Minister, and most people will refer to him as Sir. That's because that job is honourable.
So you're basically saying that when approaching matters of national importance, you have to be impartial.
Well, you have to be coldly neutral. It's very important, these two words, coldly neutral. You have to be coldly neutral. And the Commissioner's failure to put in what the Prime Minister himself said adds a bit of doubt to that last three lines of page 930. What do they mean by that? That Mr. Mahendran had not been instructed or directed by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister insisted, and we saw the Oxford Dictionary's
statement, right.
the definition of the word insist. So it really is sad, bad news when Sri Lanka is fighting political patronage and fighting corruption to find that these things have been left out. And some people will think that it's not impartial.
Unfortunately for us, that's all the time we have for this tonight. It's back to the main news studio for the continuation of the news.
Thank you, Ramesh. Moving on to other local news now. Speaking at a public rally in Siripura, Trincomalee, JVP leader Anurukumara Dissanayaka had this to say regarding the Prime Minister.
Ranil Wickremesinghe is the same. He is not doing what he said he would do after taking the position of the Prime Minister. I remember he said that after coming into power, they would catch the thieves, imprison the thieves, and use the stolen property to develop the country. Did they catch the thieves? No. They protect the thieves. Ranil Wickremesinghe, Tilak Marapana, Vajirabe Vardhana and the police minister Sagar Ratnayaka all protected the thieves. Do you know why I mentioned these names? Because when this is aired on TV, they will ask how they protected the thieves and I will tell them everything.
Issuing a media release, Transparency International Sri Lanka has expressed concern regarding the decision to convene Parliament on the 8th of February when the moratorium on campaigning for the local government elections comes into effect.
Transparency International Sri Lanka highlights that there is ample opportunity between now and the 8th of February to convene a sitting of Parliament to debate the reports of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on Treasury bond issuances and the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on serious acts of fraud and corruption. TISL Executive Director Asok Obesekara notes that the coverage of the bond and the Presifac debate would provide more information to the public, which will enhance the voters' ability to make an informed decision. Furthermore, the release issued by Transparency International Sri Lanka notes that if the debate is held on the 8th of February, media institutions which cover the debate could find themselves contravening the guidelines issued by the Elections Commission of Sri Lanka. While recognizing that the debate in Parliament on the Bond Commission and Presifac reports is already overdue, TISL asserts the importance of ensuring that the local government elections are free and fair and that the authority of the Elections Commission of Sri Lanka is not undermined. A party leaders' meeting was convened this morning under the auspices of the President.
The meeting was convened at the Presidential Secretariat. A party leaders' meeting was held today to discuss the future course of action with regard to the Bond Commission report. According to the Bond Commission, the Attorney General's Department and the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption also have to be briefed on what to do. With regard to the issue of certain pages missing in this report, it was said that the initial report was a complete one. Certain classified information and certain documents linked with criminal investigations have not been presented because it is information which cannot be obtained through the Right to Information Act. The other matter was, new legislation will be presented to Parliament over the next 2 to 3 weeks on investigating financial crimes. Almost all parties were present. The JVP was not there. Not many at leadership level were present. Only representatives had been sent. But the President had informed every party. There is no issue in the process. Everyone agreed to support it.
The Maldivian joint opposition has petitioned the Maldives Supreme Court to temporarily remove President Abdullah Yameen from the office of the presidency.
The petition requests the Supreme Court of the Maldives to rule that President Yameen has broken the law and is unfit for office. The petition has been signed by all leaders of the Maldivian joint opposition, including former Presidents Maumoon Abdul Gayoom and Mohammad Nasheed. Issuing a media release, the Maldivian joint opposition states that they petitioned the Supreme Court as the parliament, which has the power to remove a president from office, has ceased to function since President Yameen ordered the military to storm the legislature. The opposition seeks to remove President Yameen from office for a number of reasons, including unprecedented corruption, unjust enrichment from appropriation of state properties and funds for personal benefit, for the benefit of his family and political associates, the failure to implement the provisions of the Constitution and the law, uphold the rule of law, checks and balances, oversight and accountability, including interfering with the lawful functioning of Parliament and independent commissions.
And with that, we go in for a short commercial break. A report released by Human Rights Watch today has said the Sri Lankan government has failed to fulfill its pledge to abolish the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The 46-page report titled Locked Up Without Evidence, Abuses under Sri Lanka's Prevention of Terrorism Act documents previous and ongoing abuses committed under the PTA, including torture and sexual abuse, forced confessions and systematic denials of due process. Executive Director of Human Rights Watch Asia Division Brad Adams said, quote, replacing this draconian counter-terrorism law with one that meets international standards should be an urgent priority if the government is serious about protecting human rights, unquote. Human Rights Watch says that while the government of President Maithripala Sirisena has taken some steps to charge or release PTA detainees, it has not put forward a plan to provide redress for those unjustly detained or address the issues of detainees charged and prosecuted solely on the basis of coerced confessions obtained during detention.
Convening a media briefing at the party headquarters in Battaramulla today, JVP Propaganda Secretary MP Vijitha Herath listed out in detail losses caused by the previous government.
A parliamentary debate on the Bond Commission report as well as a debate on serious financial fraud should be held before the 7th of February. Here we have the Bond Commission report and here we have the report on serious acts of financial fraud. One contains the theft of the previous government and other contains the thefts of the current government. So both of these reports are essentially the same. If you calculate the losses, it amounts to billions. There is a 10 million rupee loss at the Fisheries Corporation. There is a loss of over 230 million caused to the independent television network through misappropriation by Mahinda Rajapaksa during the previous presidential election. A 20 million rupee loss at Chilau Plantations Limited. A 7 million rupee loss at Rakna Arakshaka Lanka in the recruiting of employees. 30 million rupee loss at Sri Lankan Catering. The Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation suffered a loss of over 380 million because of campaign activities of Mahinda Rajapaksa during the presidential election. There is a 7 million rupee loss for the National Transport Commission and a 20 million rupee loss for the National Youth Services Council. Similarly, this report has listed out the millions in losses which have been caused. It contains details of Vimal Veerawansa, Piyasiri Vijayanayaka, Jayanta Samaravira, Mohammad Muzammil, Piyankar Jayaratne and Padma Udeshanta. It speaks of how they misused vehicles and so on. It contains how Basil Rajapaksa, during his term as minister, used security vehicles which did not belong to him. The approved number of vehicles was 3, but he had used 11 high security vehicles, which brings the total to 14. This is for ministerial security. The official security detail is 7, but Basil Rajapaksa had 64 personnel from the Navy and 84 from the Army. Usually, under the Bribery Act, if a parliamentarian is accused of fraud and corruption and is found guilty of those charges, his or her civic rights can be stripped. That is the law, and it is the same for MP Mahinda Rajapaksa, MP Keheliya Rambukwella and MP Rajitha Senaratne.
Keheliya Rambukwella mantriwarayatat ekai, Rajitha Senaratne mantriwarayatat ekai.
Minister of Special Assignments Saratha Amanugama convened a media briefing in Kandy today.
Last year he formed an economic commission, and that commission functions directly under the President. The Prime Minister is in it. I am in it. The Finance Minister is in it, and even Minister Susil Premajanta is also in it. On the other side, we have members representing the Treasury, people like the Secretary of the Treasury. The President intends to intervene in these issues through this commission.
Convening a media briefing today, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party remarked on the promises of jobs made by the government during the election campaign.
I feel that after the 10th of February, there needs to be a change in the administration of the state. I saw recently in a newspaper that there are 496,000 vacancies in the state sector and state-owned corporations. Instead of talking about the million jobs, if we fill these vacancies, we would have supplied half of the jobs we promised. We suggested to the President that we should give away these jobs within the next 2 years. The other thing is that we don't have a place in our country for the educated. That is the case in Parliament as it is in the rest of the country. It's the same in other organizations. We waited long enough. We should bring all these people together and form think tanks at ministry level and get the universities involved too. The university students are still on the road citing the Saitam issue. If I was given that subject, I would have solved the problem in 24 hours. It could have been resolved in one gazette.
The minister further expressed views on unqualified individuals holding state office.
When the hedging deal took place, I asked the chairman of COPE what hedging is, and he said yes. He didn't know how to tell me the difference between imports and exports. Then came the DGM of Finance. I asked him where he worked before this, and he said the name of a private firm that suffered major losses. I asked him their annual revenue. He said 300 million. But no point talking as that money is lost. Now how much is the annual turnover here? At the time it was about 3.5 billion. When they couldn't handle one for $300 million and went broke, the former finance minister manager became the DGM of Finance at the oil corporation. The education, experience and qualifications of individuals must be considered when appointing them to such important positions. The reason that the private sector doesn't go broke is because they appoint the right people. They update their knowledge. The global business environment is competitive. When we say airlines, a man even without O-levels gets appointed to run it here. So who is responsible? Is it the people of this country? The people in power need to know to appoint the right people. This is what you call policy. We must not make appointments based on a person. It must be based on a policy.
The beginnings of a South Asian Symphony Orchestra were announced at a press briefing held today with the Symphony Orchestra of Sri Lanka and former High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka and former Foreign Secretary Srimati Nirupama Rao.
Music really transcends borders, that it goes beyond political boundaries, all the barriers that tend to divide people. It's because music speaks a universal language. It doesn't matter to which country you belong. I think great music teaches us so much about our common humanity. We've had our share of problems, we've had our share of differences, we've had occasional conflicts and confrontation, but we must look beyond that to horizons much beyond that. Because without working together, without communicating better with each other, without understanding each other better, without making harmony rather than disharmony, I think we will be able to build a better future for this region of ours. Because we have so much to do, as one poet observed, we have miles to go before we sleep, and we must have promises to keep, and our promise should be to build a better future.
So that's a wrap of Primetime News tonight.
Stay tuned on to TV1. Coming up after the news is Face the Nation. The topic tonight, the local government election and the transformation of Colombo. A conversation with mayoral candidates and representatives.
For the News First team, I'm Stephanie Lazarus.
And I'm Shane Silva. Take care and good night.